John Groats to Land's End. Did it in September 2025, basically 2nd September, 25th of September, 24 days. I decided to do the Sustrans route, noting it was sort of quiet back roads and paths. Chose to do it in September, missed the school holidays, and also thought, well, the weather would still be okay. Basically, I flew into London and a couple of days there, then caught the day train to Inverness on the Sunday before. And then beauty of the day train, you don't have to pack your bike up in a bag, which you have to do in the overnighter. So it had separate lockable storage, which was great. And then the next day from Inverness, I got the train, local train basically to Thurso, which again had bike storage at the back of the carriages. And at Thurso, that's where I intended to start my joggle journey, basically going to Thurso, John O'Groats, then back to Thurso on the first day. Just ready to sort things out, any issues or anything like that. I was quite impressed with both the train journeys, just in terms of bike storage and just the way it was done. I was quite impressed. My intention was to start joggle with shorter days, just as you sort of get used to continue doing cycling again, and also have a bit of time for any, if I needed any minor bike adjustments or gearing or anything like that, which was nothing. Days 1 to 6 were in the Scottish Highlands. Day 1, Tuesday, the 2nd of September, basically Thurso to John O'Groats and then back to Thurso. It was 70 k's of very quiet roads, pretty flat really. Sort of started to get a bit of an idea how sort of desolate the Highlands are, but it was a nice easy start. Day 2, did Thurso down to Tongue, 71 k's, some climbing, not steep, but a few like 1 to 2 kilometre sort of climbs. Most roads that were like single lane with passing lanes every few hundred metres. It was very quiet with sort of local traffic and a few motorhomes. The scenery was basically a continuation of being quite sort of desolate, and certainly noticed the number of windmill farms. The lack of trees was sort of quite obvious. Day 3, 63 k's, Tongue to Leg. Had a mid-morning start as a shorter day, and also noted there was no real options for food on the route. Similar scenery to the first couple of days, but started to see some locks, which made it more dramatic. Dropped into the Crask Inn, which is the reputation of being the most remote pub in Britain. It certainly is in the middle of nowhere. Again, plenty of like 1 to 2 kilometre, fairly easy climbs. Day 4 was a longer day, 104 k's of leg to Inverness. Was meant to be 86 k's, but I missed a turn, so I did a longer circuit along a river, which was all quite pleasant. The scenery was really starting to change, a lot more greenery. That feeling of being desolate sort of disappeared. It was quite a fast day on the surface, with only sort of one major hill being Stroyce Hill. Again, an easy climb over about 2 to 3 k's. A great ride along the Cromarty Firth into Dingle, where I came across a farmer's cafe outside of town, which was a great stop. Right in Inverness was on a separated bike path following the A9, which then led to crossing the large cable-stayed bridge in Inverness. It was a very, very varied scenery sort of day, really enjoyable. Day 5 was a shorter day, just 68 k's, Inverness to Aviemore. Some hills and continued undulation as you sort of was climbing out of Inverness, just for about the first sort of 30 k's or so. Stopped about an hour out of Inverness I thought I'd better watch the All Blacks game on a day pass to Sky Sports that I bought, but to no avail, unfortunately. Anyhow, it was the first time that I got directly exposed to a very strong headwind. Had about 20 k's of it. It was quite dramatic. Stopped for lunch at Carbridge, which seemed quite popular as a base for walkers and cyclists. It was a really good mixture of day, from seeing burial cairns from the Bronze Age, riding on paths, quiet roads, rode through the Caledonian Forest, which is like a native forest, and then through the Speyside Way, which is like a sealed path that went through silver birch woodland and low heather, which sort of led into the popular town of Aviemore. It's sort of just a great, very easy day of cycling. Day 6 was a longer day, 96 k's, Aviemore to Pitlochry. Sort of left about 8. I was expecting a bit of rain, but basically it just sort of blew all around me until like the last couple of hours, where basically it was just continuous. Again, had a couple of hours of headwinds. Long, gradual climbing out to the, I'm going to say this wrong, Drometra Pass. Again, not steep, and some undulation, but overall there was climbing for about 40 k's. A couple of hours on a path, plus on a section that was originally a road, but it was now closed. It was just awesome infrastructure. Last 35 k's or so was sort of like gradually down into Pitlochry, which was, yeah, it's another lovely town. Strange, sort of a few k's out from Pitlochry, came across this large shopping sort of village complex called Brewer, B-R-U-A-R. It was just sort of weird, like in the middle of this quiet sort of area. It came across, there was full car parks, lots of people, just strange after such a quiet day. I'd now finished the Scottish Highlands. Day 7 to 10 were spent cycling through southern Scotland. Day 7 was 98 k's, Pitlochry to Callander. Cycled him just under 7 hours excluding stops, so a long day. It was good weather day though. First 60 k's were just easy cycling, no real hills after initial climb of about 5 k's, and then just sort of followed the shores of Loch Tay. Stopped in the village of Killen for a nice lunch, and then the last stage of 35 k's was spent on a combination of the first real gravel I'd encountered so far, an old railway line including bridges and sealed paths. It was pretty stunning infrastructure and some very varied scenery. Day 8 was again another long day, 99 k's, Glasgow, Callander to Glasgow. First part was 55 k's to Balloch, which is a main staging area for Loch Lomond. There was a couple of hills. The ride out of Callander was a single road that quickly sort of became a private road, and then a gravel trail, then a shared road with a 10-mile-per-hour speed limit. Saw about 4 cars in 4 hours. Lots of forests and past 3 major lochs. This stage is recognised as being one of the most scenic parts of the entire ride, and it was pretty obvious. Balloch to Glasgow basically left Loch Lomond and followed the right of River Clyde. Very flat cycling on a path for most of the way into Glasgow. Day 9 was Glasgow to Abington and was 75 k's. Pretty flat for the first 35 k's, and then basically a gradual climb to Abington. You leave Glasgow again following the River Clyde. Most of the day was on paths and included riding through the Chattel Herald, I'm going to say it, I've said it wrong obviously, Country Park and moorland from Douglas Water to Clydesdale. It was quite remote in parts. I ended up staying at a day's inn at the local service centre. There's really nothing much in Abington, and it was fine. You know, bike in the room, there's a full range of food at the service centre. You only really washing clothes and going to bed. Day 10 was 86 k's Abington to Gretna Green. It was downhill after the climb into Abington the day before. Went through Loggerby, but not really a lot of options for food. It didn't really do much for me as a stop. Fairly boring stage, not really helped the fact it was pretty consistent rain all day. It was my second time staying that night at a day's inn. It was at a service centre outside Gretna Green. There were no other real options. I'd now completed southern Scotland. Days 11 to 15 were in the northwest England. So day 11 was 73 k's, again an easy day, Gretna Green to Penrith. Crossed into England with the town of Liontown and obviously lots of English flags. It was really lots of varied scenery again, lots of paths, pretty changeable weather. Had a nice break in Carlisle with a pretty stunning castle and a great coffee shop, which basically, I had a shorter day and it was easy cycling. Came to cross my first of what were a few throughout the trip of road closed signs. Sort of carried on and basically said, okay, there's enough room to get the bike around and sort of thing. Had a few, as I said, on the trip. Coming to Penrith on the path, I ended up sort of following a horse and buggy for the last 4Ks, which was just a little bit surreal. You don't get that every day. Day 12, long day, 113 Ks and Penrith to Carnforth. It was crap weather. Just rained all day and I even got two, well, small, but they were still hailstorms. It was weather and it was tough going. Ongoing undulations just meant you really didn't appreciate the scenery at all. To top it off, I got a puncture in the middle of nowhere in the rain. 8.5 hours riding time plus stops. I was pretty happy to finish. I sort of repaired the tube and at night and just couldn't see anything in the tyre. Day 13, 81 k's Carnforth to Blackburn. Just climbed up the hill out of town and there was a road closed ahead by the police because of some accident. Police sort of, nicely told me the alternate roads to go back and take, but obviously they meant nothing to me. I'd worked through in Google Maps and, and minor detour. Had to use a couple of B roads for 6Ks, but still, there's just no traffic. Had 3 decent climbs during the day, including a few 13 to 15% gradient sections. And then, of course, I got another puncture in the back tyre. I took off the tyre and found a thorn embedded in the tyre that night, repaired the tube, and also just replaced the front brake pads, which were wearing out quite quickly. I had left early as it was meant to rain, but it was just cloudy. Arrived mid-afternoon in Blackburn and just had a relaxing out of the coffee to sort of chill after the day. Day 14, a short day. Playing Blackburn to Manchester. Leisurely breakfast, later start, going to be a good day. Best laid plans basically. Very strong winds and rain virtually all day. 2 punctures in the rear tyre throughout the morning. Used up my 2 spare tubes. Took off the tyre and found more thorns that had worked themselves through the tyre. I basically had to cut them out with a little pair of scissors. Just in perspective, I haven't had a puncture in 2 years before this trip. So I was quite surprised. Found a bike shop about 20 k's from Manchester and replaced the repaired tubes. So hopefully I got that out of the way. A lot of the day was on paths, which gave some protection from the wind. It was a nice ride through the woodlands into Manchester. It was just an absolute shame about the weather and the ongoing punches. Day 15, Manchester to Nantwich, 75 k's. Easy day cycling, pretty flat. I left Manchester on seal paths and then it's just a combination of canal tow paths and paths through woodlands. Did have about 3 k's of the canal path closed at one point because it was a Tuesdays and anglers have exclusive use, which I just thought was okay. I guess that's the way it's done, but it was just a little bit amusing as though riding past a bike on a path was going to upset the anglers, I guess. Anyhow, who was I to query? Only a couple of showers and pretty fine day. I'd now completed the northwest of England. Day 16 to 18 was the West Midlands of England. Day 16 was 82 k's, Nantwich to Bridgnorth. It rained pretty well all morning, but after the rain stopped, it was a great day ride of quiet roads and paths. I stopped in the town of Newport for coffee, and then I sort of had paths all the way through to Telford, and then I had woodland, and then what seemed to be like a private road through an estate, which sort of included an old disused railway line. It was pretty cool actually. Day 17 was 98 k's, Bridgnorth to Tewkesbury. This was a tough day. Just got out of Bridgnorth and the road turned down a trail. It was climbing and just a lot of mud. After 10 minutes or so, it was clear the bike just wasn't going anywhere. It was too muddy and slippery, and I had a long walk for a few k's ahead of me. Decided that was a little bit ridiculous, and sort of looked and sort of saw there was an alternative quiet road, which I took, and then a few k's down the road I came across another path that was in the same condition, which I just avoided. I just took another quiet back road. I guess that's one advantage of England, is the number of roads. There'd obviously been a lot of rain in the preceding days. It was turning into a very long day, and there was a number of hills in the mix as well. I was pretty happy to finish the day, and I was absolutely stuffed. I mean, it took me, let alone cleaning the bike before I went into the Premier Inn at Tewkesbury where I was staying. It was a long day. But I had a big bonus. My partner and her daughter had arrived in England and were staying not too far away at Stowe on the Wall. They drove down and we had a nice dinner, and it was a great boost after, I think I put down probably the toughest day of the ride. Day 18, Tewkesbury to Bristol, 116 k's. It was a long day, but it was fabulous weather and good terrain. Got a few k's out of Tewkesbury to a bridge where my GPS said there was a bridge. There wasn't a bridge. I met a local who was looking at me staring at the water waiting for a bridge to magically appear, who confirmed the obvious, there's no bridge, but there had been a punt, but that had stopped some time ago. Option 1 was to go back to Tewkesbury and go around on the other side, or option 2 she suggested I look at was the public footpath across farmers' fields, about 5 or 6 k's along the river, and then you come to a road and a bridge. So it was bone dry, the field, otherwise I would have been a bit hesitant, I think. So it was a fabulous experience, going through gates and carrying the bike over styes and this sort of thing. Really enjoyed it. I then had a late breakfast in Gloucester, which is a stunning city in the central area. All the docks and that have been done up. It was, I really enjoyed it like that. Attending leaving Gloucester, I'd then finished the West Midlands, and I was now entering the southwest of England, which would take me through to Land's End, basically. From Gloucester, I was based on canal paths and quiet roads, just enjoying it immensely until about 20 k's from Bristol, where I was directed through what is a pretty new industrial area of Amazon, and those sort of distribution sort of areas were there. However, the path to get over into the city part, it was completely blocked by building works, so I had no way to get through. So sort of looking at alternatives and trying, but any of the options. But then I found another one that sort of did a circuit right down to the main river, and that was fine. Went around joined the original route that was outlined in the Sustrans. Got into the CBD of Bristol. I got to admit, I wasn't that impressed by the cycling infrastructure. I mean, there were paths and then there were streets, and I know these are challenges, but it wouldn't have been my preferred route to do. I did say there is more of an alternative you can do, which is, not flatter. Maybe it's not as interesting to see, but anyhow. Night in Bristol was catching up with a mate who'd spent some time in Sydney and now had gone back to Bristol, which was, it was a good catch up. And then, I was in the southwest. the southwest from now to day 24. Day 19, a short day, 62 k's Bristol to Glastonbury. Easy day, so I had a breakfast and had a late start, just checking out a bit more of Bristol. A pretty uninspiring ride leaving Bristol on a canal path, very tidal, not exactly scenic around it. Had a very lazy break at a little village of Chumango, which was really nice, and then climbed up the Mandip Hills. It was about 5 k's and some very, very steep sections. It's obviously known to locals, or some locals are obviously riding group on road bikes, looking very fast, enjoying that. But then it was quite a nice ride down into Glastonbury. Pretty mixed weather, showers here and there as well. Day 20, it was a longer day, 94 k's Glastonbury to Dulverton. So I left early, but it was quick. Fantastic weather again. First 50 k's was basically dead flat, which included 30 k's on a canal path, which is just like, wow, it was quite unbelievable. When I got to Taunton, where I had quite an early lunch, it was fabulous cycling. Had some climbing the last 30 k's, and then probably about the last couple of k's into Dulverton, we were sort of on a busier road, like there's a car every minute or two, like 2 k's, who cares. Day 21, 70 k's Dulverton to Bidford. It was another stunning day weather-wise. A steep climb out of Dulverton for about 1.5 k's. It was quite surprising. And then it was quite undulating across the Exmoor, which was really cool to ride over. And then sort of had a gradual decline, about 25 k's down to Barnstaple. I was now on the coast and enjoyed a long break at Barnstaple, and then I started on the Tarka Trail, which is an old railway line, which was going to take me to Bidford. It was quite a popular route, just going sort of like up to about 10 k's out of Barnstaple, where there was a cafe on the way, and there's quite a few cyclists obviously just doing day rides or afternoon rides, etc. Day 22, this is a long day. Bidford to Bodmin, 117 k's. I knew it was going to be a long day, so I left at 5 a.m. But the reason I could get in the dark was that I was on the Tarka Trail for the first 25 k's. So it was car free, but it was basically pitch black. Usually relatively relaxing, but I got a hell of a fright when my sort of front light sort of came across showing the artwork of 3 figures sitting on a bench, obviously representing how people used to wait for the train. But at 5:30 in the morning, it made me jump. There was a few climbs and it was quite undulating, then down into Bude, B-U-D-E. From there, you climbed up to the Bodmin Moor, which was a very quiet road and very remote. It seemed like it was an old disused airfield that sort of was dissected by the road. It was something that was really quite cool compared to what you'd done in the morning. There it was down to join the start of the Camel Trail, and there was the Snail Pace Cafe, which was recommended break. So the last 10 k's then I was on this Camel Trail, and it was just a lovely ride really, following a bit of a river. It was very pleasant. Day 23, 79 k's Bodmin to Truro. Another stunning day of weather. I keep thinking maybe rain never happened previously. It was a very easy day. Started with a camel trail for about 25 k's onto Padstow, which is a pretty cool waterfront town with old harbour, and so I had an early lunch. Then I was on back roads and paths to Newquay, which was another just stunning coastal town, a bit bigger than Padstow, obviously quite a touristy place in its peak time. I just basically had another lunch. Pretty easy riding into Truro. Up in one area of the road was blocked by a big mound of dirt. I walked over it with my bike and saw that the road continued on the other side. There was a bypass about 1 kilometre away, which I then subsequently saw, but it was a bit amusing. Day 24, 70 k's, Truro to Land's End, going to be my last day. It was a bit surreal really. Stunning weather again. Such an easy day to finish the way I wanted it to be. Started not long out of Truro going through an old miners' trail, So it was the old sort of mining areas, and you got all the tailings and the old huts, and I went for a few Ks. It was, yeah, really quite sort of cool. Stopped at Hale on the coast for a snack, and then just sort of had another easy ride down the coast. You came out at the coast right next to St Michael's Mount above Penzance. Then just followed the coastal path to Penzance and then round to a little area of Mouse Hole. And then I just had another stop for compulsory food. And then it was a very steep climb out of Mouse Hole, which I just turned around and said, you know, I think I'll walk. Why? Because I can. I had plenty of time. Yeah. So, yeah, I just couldn't answer the question, why bother cycling of it. So that was cool. Then I just had quiet roads and coastal path to Land's End, and yeah, I'd aimed to get there between 2 and 2:30, and I got there at that time. And it was great to finish. My partner and daughter were there. Yeah, it was just felt quite surreal finishing it. It just felt as though it hadn't been 24 days, I'd just done a few days. But anyhow, Land's End is very touristy. People were queued up to get photos and their name on the signposts. We just sort of wangled it so you could sort of see the signpost in the background, and my bike was in the foreground, and we weren't going to pay £11 for a photo. It all seemed a bit pointless, really. Anyhow, phenomenal trip. final thoughts. Joggle done. This was just an awesome adventure with scenery that just varied so much every day. Yeah, doing an average of just over 80 k's a day on mainly sealed or hard compacted surfaces, it meant you sort of had some very easy days combined with not having to have too many early starts, which has sort of have been quite part of, or a big part of some of the previous couple rides I've done, and a lot of that is because I've done some higher K averages per day, but also there's been a higher percentage of gravel surfaces, and some of them are rough surfaces and they slow you down and they are draining and exhausting. The lack of traffic and the number of off-road paths meant it was the safest cycling I've ever done. It continually surprised me in terms of the lack of cars that I saw on the route. Some days you're lucky if I saw 10 cars, excluding villages and towns and that. I was constantly surprised. I think the infrastructure is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, thanks to Strands for putting the guide together. I think it's amazing. Accommodation, I usually book about 4 or 5 days in advance, but noting I was being met at the end, I actually booked the whole thing right through. But you didn't need to, there was plenty really. I stayed hotels and B&Bs here and there, but I was mainly spent, majority of nights were spent in the Premier Inn, which was a reasonable cost generally, and it also allowed bikes in the room, which I'm a big fan of, just so you can check it over at night, and yeah, just that reassurance. Also means you're not reliant on anything if you need to leave early in the morning or anything like that, in terms of access. Food wise, I always had a little, enough for a day, food with me, usually just buns and rolls and that sort of stuff, and bars. And that was also, I was just cognizant that some days you didn't directly go through a town. You might, the outskirts of it all, it's just a couple of k deviation. But that worked well. I managed to enjoy a pint and a cooked meal every night, which was a nice way to finish every day. I had a tracker and a website of the route from a company called Follow My Challenge, who I would highly recommend. It was, from my perspective, what I sent them and how they set it up, and it was very easy done, and friends and family found it very simple and reassuring to follow. Highly recommend. The bike setup, I ride a Salsa Fargo, and I've been at it about 5 years now, and I just remain a big fan. Didn't miss a beat, as I wouldn't expect that it would. The only change I'd made for this ride from previous is that I changed the gearing to give me a lower range. Just recognise it, maybe it's part of the age, but increasingly I'm finding I'm walking up some of the hills a bit more. So I went from a 42 to a 52 in the back cassette. This was a game changer for me, just in terms of you could just basically click it down to low gear and just spin up just about any hill you could find. So the only reason I ever walked is because, well, I felt like a walk. As I said, this was a game changer previous rides, and I'm quite rapt that I had that put on. In terms of technology, I use GPX files for the Sustrans routes loaded onto, I use the Bike GPX app. I've used this app for a number of rides, and I just like the fact it's a simple app to use, and I don't need any other whistles and bells. Bike GPX is I loaded on a spare iPhone, well, it's an older iPhone of course, that I mount on the front handlebars, and then I also use it for photos and videos throughout the day. I have a battery pack in my top chew bag that if it needs charging throughout the day, I can just easily charge the phone without disrupting anything. In terms of recording each day's ride, I've used the Garmin watch. It lasts all day. It just loads up, no problem at all. I've used that for 5 years now of using it. Overall, I'm sort of like going, oh, what's next? Which will be 2027. But a huge fan now of having a look at what else there is in the UK and Europe. Finally, a massive thanks to family and friends who were continuously messaging with support during the ride, which yeah, it just makes a huge difference, and obviously very much appreciated. Thank you for watching.